I'm really excited to welcome everyone. Thanks for coming along today. And as you're aware, this session is an introduction to FASD for Kinship Carers, and particularly pertinent for this month. As you know, it's September is FASD Awareness Month. And in addition to running lots of events, Barbara's run off her feet, as the rest of the team. We're delighted that our colleagues have agreed to deliver this session specifically for our kinship carers. And thanks everybody for coming along and taking the time out your busy days to join the session. Just to make you aware, the session's being recorded and it's going to go on to the FASD Hub YouTube channel, and our website may have access to that as well. My name's Susan Hunter and I'm the project coordinator of the Kinship Care Advice Service for Scotland, and we're hosting the event in conjunction with the FASD Hub for Scotland. And I'm delighted to welcome the rest of our panel who are going to introduce themselves. If we start off with Barbara. Barbara, can you?
So I'm Barbara Augustin. I'm the FASD lead in the FASD Hub Scotland, and I'm adoptive parent of siblings who are now 13 and 14 years old. And yeah, so I've been around the kind of FASD community for quite a long time. My son was diagnosed as a baby, and delighted to come along today and share a little bit of our knowledge, a little bit of our experience, and how we can maybe support you and the young people or children that you're caring for as well.
Lovely, thank you, Barbara. And next, I'd like to introduce Marion Mackay. Marion.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Marion now. I've had a legal guardianship for 14 years now for my 3 great nephews, 2 who have been diagnosed with FASD. The older boy hasn't been as yet, but I'm glad to be allowed to participate today.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Marion. And then now I'd like to introduce Jackie. Jackie Thompson, if you can introduce yourself.
Good morning, my name's Jackie. I'm a kinship care advisor. So I provide advice and assistance to kinship carers to help them identify legal status of the child that they care for, and then to look at any assistance from the local authority that might be available, and examining any benefit entitlements and support the kinship carers to apply for those benefits. So it's generally specialist second tier advice, including casework, and I support kinship carers through the complexities of dealing with the various pieces of legislation and ultimately achieve the correct financial entitlement. So that's the aim anyway.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, everyone. So just moving on, this is a Zoom webinar and everyone will be placed on mute. If you want to ask a question, there's a facility. It's at the bottom of my screen. It says Q&A and it might be at the top of your screen. Sometimes it varies. If you want to ask a question, you can just type in there. There are some questions which have already been placed via the Eventbrite system, and we'll deal with those at the end of the session. But also following the session, there'll be a survey monkey sent out. So if you could maybe take the time to complete the survey monkey and send it back to us and return it to us. We're always keen to have these to find out what we're doing well and what we're maybe, what we could improve on. So I think it's important, if you can, to give us a little bit of feedback. I think that's everything. And I'm now going to hand over to Barbara to start the session and to move us on.
Thanks, Susan. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time, half an hour or so, just telling you really what FASD is and a background to it. So I'm going to put my screen share on. I'm going to click that. And I'm going to ask Susan for a thumbs up if she can see my screen share okay. Excellent, that's always a good start. And so yeah, just welcome along today. We're really pleased that you're interested in knowing more about FASD, and we hope that today you'll pick up maybe some new information or some new tips, or at least you might know where to go to get support. So let's get started first of all with the kind of basics about what FASD is. So this definition of FASD has been written by CAN FASD, who are based in Canada. And Canada is very much at the forefront of FASD research and diagnosis and support. So FASD stands for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. It's a lifelong disability that affects the brain and body of people who were exposed to alcohol in the womb. Each person with FASD has both strengths and challenges, and we need special support to help them succeed with many different parts of their daily lives. And as we'll share with you this morning, children, young people and adults who have FASD, it's very much a spectrum and they can be affected in many different ways. And although we'll be sharing with you some of the challenges that individuals with FASD might face, we also hope that you'll get a sense that these individuals have great strengths and that they can achieve so much when they've got the right kind of support. So key facts about FASD. So FASD is caused by prenatal alcohol exposure. Sometimes we call that PAE. So if you hear me talk about PAE, it's prenatal alcohol exposure. And that basically means that a fetus was exposed to alcohol in the womb. Alcohol is what's known as a teratogen or a toxin. And a teratogen is a substance that can cross the placenta and may cause damage to brain cells or the central nervous system. And because alcohol is water soluble, when it's consumed during pregnancy, it passes freely from the mother's bloodstream through the placenta into the fetal bloodstream. And because the fetus doesn't have a fully developed liver, it's not able to filter those toxins out from the alcohol. So the alcohol circulates in the fetus's bloodstream, and this could cause harm at any point of the 9 months of pregnancy. And also alcohol is broken down more slowly in a baby than in an adult. It can stay in a baby's body for up to 24 hours longer. So if the pregnant woman has maybe an alcoholic drink or binge drink, maybe she doesn't know that she's pregnant, then the next day she might have a bit of a headache, a bit of a hangover. It may be 24 hours after that before the alcohol molecules leave the body of the fetus. So there's a lot of time there in which harm can occur. And FASD is the most common neurodevelopmental condition in the Western world. Neurodevelopmental means brain-based. There's no cure for FASD, and it is a lifelong condition. And it's thought to affect between 3 to 5% of the general population. So that's about 1 in 20 people. Now, if you compare that to autism spectrum disorder, that affects about 1 in 96 people. So FASD is not at all a rare condition, but it's certainly not one that enough people know about. If you were to ask somebody in the street corner, can you tell me something about autism? Then they could probably tell you something, but the same is not true for FASD. But unfortunately, FASD is much, much more prevalent, but is often unrecognised and undiagnosed. Now, within the FASD, we have something that we call the Spiky Profile. And as you'll hear this morning, no two individuals on the FASD spectrum are the same. And each person has both strengths and challenges. And the Spiky Profile is about where people are developmentally compared to their chronological age. But I am going to come back to that and I'll explain more about that in a few moments. So FASD is a whole body condition. It can affect any part of the body or the brain. So an individual might have difficulties in certain areas of their brain, or they might struggle with certain tasks or certain environments. They might be slow to meet milestones, such as crawling or walking. There's actually about 426 comorbidities associated with FASD. So that's about 426 different ways in which an individual can be affected by the alcohol. So it really can affect any part of an individual. It affected my son in terms of his development of his muscles and his legs, as well as lots of things going on in his brain. And my daughter was born with a cleft lip, and there's a fair chance that was down to alcohol as well. So it really can affect any part of an individual, although it is a brain-based condition. That's where the harm occurs during development. It's often called a hidden disability because generally you can't tell by looking at somebody if they have FASD. Around 10% of individuals do have some facial features which are associated with the condition. So those are like narrow eye openings, a thin upper lip, and a smooth philtrum, which is a little groove between your nose and your upper lip. And for a long time, people kind of relied on looking only at facial features to decide if somebody had FASD. But more recent research has told us that only about 10% of individuals have those facial features. And it's all to do with the point during pregnancy at which alcohol was consumed. So it's very much a hidden disability. And so you definitely can't tell by looking at somebody. But how alcohol affects the individual has lots to do with the amount of alcohol that was drunk or the stage of pregnancy at which it was consumed. And what we do know is that there's a very clear message that there's no known safe amount of alcohol or time to consume alcohol during pregnancy. So it's no alcohol, no risk is the message from chief medical officers across the UK. And they also advise that if you're pregnant or planning a pregnancy, the safest approach is not to drink alcohol at all. Individuals with FASD often face challenges throughout their lives. However, with early diagnosis and the right support and interventions, then individuals with FASD can thrive and be successful. While FASD might affect anyone who is exposed to alcohol in utero, some groups are disproportionately affected. And one of these groups is children and young people who have been taken into the care system, where there is sadly a higher likelihood of prenatal alcohol exposure. So this research from Peterborough in 2015 tells us that 75% of children who went forward for an adoption medical had prenatal alcohol exposure noted in their medicals. Now that doesn't mean that they had FASD. It just means that alcohol was consumed during the pregnancy and that has been noted on their records. About 34% of care experienced children, so that's children who are adopted, fostered, and in kinship, have a history of prenatal alcohol exposure. And care experienced children and young people could be as much as 4 times as likely to have FASD as the general population. So you can imagine that's quite a lot, and FASD does become part of the picture for a huge number of adoptive, foster and kinship families. So that's why we're glad you've come along today to learn a little more about it. So these are some of the kind of broad areas in which individuals might have challenges. And we'll work our way through these and I will give you some examples. So the first one of those is attention and memory. So memory can be a real difficulty for many people, particularly in the area of memory of language. They might need constant reminders. So you might find yourself saying, you're sort of repeating yourself over and over again. They may learn things, but then forget them again. So like my son learned how to ride a unicycle, but by the next day, he had kind of lost a bit of that learning. He was kind of like 5 steps forward, 3 steps back, and he had to regain some of that knowledge. And that's very, very common in school as well. Maybe they'll be able to do something one day and then not be able to do it the next day. And that might be quite hard to spot because children are also really good at learning how to copy their peers and hide the challenges. And I know my son covers up the gaps in his memory by using his sister. So if I say to him, "What did you do at Granny's house today?" He'll say to his sister, "You tell her." And it's not because he's being lazy, it's because he is using a tactic that he's developed to cover the fact that he can't actually remember all the things that he did at his granny's house. And many children with FASD also have ADHD, and there's a huge overlap between FASD and ADHD. It's all to do with the different parts of the brain that are affected. So sitting still in the classroom, being able to even sit, watch television, concentrate can be really, really difficult. They might struggle with abstract concepts. So they could be really good at maths, They could be really good at numbers and counting, but when they need to transfer that learning into telling the time or using money, they actually might really struggle with that because time and money are abstract concepts. So might need a little bit of extra support around that as well. Social skills is quite a big area. A lot of individuals with FASD can be quite delayed in their social development, particularly as they get older into the kind of late primary age. Really, I'd say between ages about 8 to 11 that the FASD can become really noticeable. So with my son, we used to live next door to the school and I could watch him in the playground, and I could almost pinpoint the point when he was about 8 that he stopped playing with his peers and he started playing with the much younger children, the kind of primary ones. And it wasn't that his development had gone backwards, it was that his peer group, their development had gone forwards and he'd been left behind. And playing with younger children is generally just easier as well. You can read their social cues, you can understand their body language, the rules of the games are much simpler as well. He's now in 13 and he's in second year, and he would still be playing with children who are about 8 and 9 if he was given that opportunity, which obviously being at high school, he doesn't get that opportunity anymore. Planning and problem solving skills is a big one. It's all to do with executive functioning, which is a part of the brain that's particularly vulnerable to the effects of alcohol. So being able to plan how to solve a problem, or being able to make a plan of what they're going to do that day, to solve problem solving sort of games and puzzles, can be really, really difficult. And also connected to executive functioning is learning from consequences. If there's some kind of challenging behaviour, there's some consequence that you maybe put in place to that behaviour, you may find that that behaviour happens again for many different reasons. But being able to understand and learn from consequences can be really difficult. Judgement skills, so that's being able to use the information around you to make a judgment about what a situation is. So to give another example from my own experience, my son once met a dog, and the dog had a tag around its neck that said vet. So my son said, oh right, so the dog is a vet. You know, he wasn't able to use his judgment to think, wait a minute, this dog's probably not been to university and probably doesn't have a job. So the dog is probably not a vet. He just took it quite literally as it was. The dog had a tag that said vet, the dog must be a vet. He was lacking the judgment skills needed. And he wasn't young when that happened, he was about 10. So yeah, it was quite eye-opening to the rest of us. Impulse control is another big area. It can be whether it can manifest in lots of different ways. It can be hitting, it can be shouting out in class, it can be impulsively eating. In lots of different ways. It's quite often the action will come first and the thinking will come later, if it comes at all. So being aware of somebody's impulses. It can be touching things, putting things. When my boy was really young, kind of 2, 3, 4, 5, everything was in the mouth impulsively. Everything had to go into his mouth. So it can be quite a difficult one to deal with, but it can be quite wide ranging in the ways that it is shown. Auditory processing, that's about instructions, for example. So if you said to your child, turn the television off, put your shoes on, put your jacket on, go and stand at the door, we're going out, then they might go and stand at the door, but they won't have done any of the other things as well. And that's partly because of memory, but also because of the auditory processing. So that's the amount of information that they have to process that they hear and how they're able to pick out what to do and remember what they need to do as well. Cognitive fatigue it's just the tiredness of just being. So maybe it's trying to sit still in the classroom all day, trying to focus, trying to listen to the teacher, trying to maybe not react to impulses that they have, maybe being overstimulated by the environment. Maybe there's too many flashing lights, maybe there's too much noise, and it all piles and piles and piles onto the child, and they get absolutely exhausted. And that's cognitive fatigue. When the brain is just overloaded, it shuts down, it just can't take anymore. It's absolutely something you might see when a child comes out of school at the end of the day and they're just absolutely full up. And sometimes that can lead to some quite challenging behaviours in terms of how they manage their cognitive fatigue. But it really is just pure exhaustion. A lot of individuals have difficulties with sleeping, and there's lots of reasons for that. It might be that they lack an internal body clock, or they might not be able to differentiate between night and day. They might not realise that nighttime means sleep time, or they may have no concept of time, because again, time is an abstract concept. And in terms of eating difficulties, they may prefer certain textures or certain colours, or they may just want to eat the same food every single day. They also may be a wee bit more prone to allergies or eating difficulties, such as a sensitive gag reflex. My son had a sensitive gag reflex, and I warned the doctor about it, but the doctor still insisted on putting one of those lollipop sticks in to check his tonsils, and you can imagine what happened. And there was still a stain on the doctor's surgery floor quite a few years later for where my doctor didn't listen to my advice about my son's sensitive gag reflex. Emotional regulation. So that's just the ability to manage our emotions, to control our emotions, to know what emotions are relevant for a certain situation. It's about understanding the emotions of others and just dealing with some of those big feelings, maybe how they react to stressful situations or things that maybe trigger them or things that make them feel afraid. It's just about managing emotions, and that's something that we can provide a lot of support around as parents and carers as well. But it can be a real challenge. Motor skills and mobility. Some individuals with FASD are fantastic at sports, really accomplished artists. It can be a real strength, motor skills and mobility, but for some individuals it can be much more challenging. So they might struggle with the cutting with the scissors or using the pencil. For my son, he had poor muscle tone in his legs, so he was a toe walker, and that was one of the first signs that he had FASD. Though actually they noticed that he was a toe walker before he could walk, but that he had some really good clinicians that were able to spot that kind of thing. And he had to have splints and plaster casts and Botox to bring his heel down so he was able to walk. So it's just another one to be aware of. It's maybe, if you notice maybe a child's not crawling at an age you would expect them to be crawling or walking, then motor skills is something to consider. Sensory processing and overload. So sensory is a really big issue for a lot of the individuals that we work with as well. They could be sensory seekers, so they go out of their way to touch things, to have sensory experiences, to get absolutely covered in mud or rolling around the beach. They really like sensory experiences. And other individuals really don't like sensory experiences. They have certain textures that they like, maybe in terms of the food that they eat. They are maybe really highly sensitive, so they don't like the labels on clothing or the seams in socks. And a lot of people are kind of in between the two. And kind of overload of sensory input can be quite upsetting for a child and can be quite stressful for them as well. It's all about getting to know the individual and what their sensory profile is and what their sensory preferences are, and putting things in place to support them so that they're able to control what they're feeling inside and to be able to achieve what they're setting out to achieve. And finally, communication, receptive and expressive. A lot of individuals with FASD can really talk the talk, but they're not always able to walk the walk. They can really have a good story. You could have a great conversation with them, but actually they maybe don't have as much understanding behind that conversation as you would like, or as you would think that they did, because they're quite good at masking the difficulties. This is what I spoke about earlier about the Spiky Profile. And what we find is that individuals with FASD may really excel in some areas, but they might be behind their peers in others. So if you imagine you've got a 18-year-old, they might have the expressive language of a 20-year-old. So you can have a really good chat, a really good conversation with them. And they might have the reading ability of a 16-year-old, but you know, that's okay. Reading ability of a 16-year-old, you can get by on that. Their living skills might, however, be down at age 11. And the money and time concepts, those abstract concepts again, might be down about age 8. Their social skills could be down at age 7. And their comprehension and social maturity could be down at age 6. So if you can imagine what you'd be expecting an 18-year-old to do, maybe to get a job. They do quite well at the interview because they can talk the talk. They can fill in the application forms because they're 16 is their reading ability and they're able to do that. However, their living skills, that's a little bit more hidden. So do they remember to take a lunch with them? Do they know how to get the bus? Are they able to manage to get up in time to get out for work? Maybe that's going to be a bit more challenging for them. Maybe what happens at the end of the week when they get their wage packet and they're given maybe quite a lot of money, but they only have the money concepts, skills of an 8-year-old. Do they use that money wisely? Are they able to budget for the rest of the week? That's maybe something that they might, through experience, they might find that it's a skill that they need a lot of support around as well. Their social skills could be down at age 7. So when they go out with their colleagues at the weekend, they may be a little bit more vulnerable than other people. They may be a bit more likely to be taken advantage of as well. And they might find it difficult to interact and to fit in. And the comprehension and social maturity is very much linked to that as well. Just the understanding of how to do the job that they've been asked to do, and how to work alongside, and how to act in a workplace as well. So this is what we call the Spiky Profile. An individual has got a wide range of developmental stages that they're at, and their chronological age, so the age that they actually are, is actually not relevant. So what we need to think about is stage of development and not age. And we do that by getting to know individuals really, really well and working out whereabouts they are on this Spiky Profile. It's not something that's fixed. So one day a person's reading ability could be at 16, the next day it could be down at 6. It can change just depending on how tired the person is and how they're doing. So it is quite a fluid thing, but it's really important to think about stage of development and not chronological age. Now, as individuals with FASD get older, so we're kind of thinking into the teenage years, the late teenage years into early adulthood, there are some what's called associated difficulties that are much more prevalent in individuals with FASD than they are in the general population, particularly if FASD goes unrecognised or diagnosed for a long time. So they include social difficulties in relating to peers, poor mental health, alcohol and drug misuse, challenges with independent living, becoming a vulnerable adult themselves. There's lots of challenges that may occur as they grow older. However, these are absolutely, it's not a case that these will definitely happen to an individual, because with the right support, early diagnosis, and being aware of that Spiky Profile and what their developmental age is, then individuals with FASD really can go on to be really, really successful. And what's really key is about changing the environment that they're in and not trying to change the individual. So it's about putting things in place to support them and being aware of the challenges that they're facing. And the best way to do that is to get to know them really well, which as kinship carers, I'm very certain that you do. Now, just coming towards the end, but I know I've said an awful lot of the challenges. I also think it's really important that I share with you some of the strengths of individuals with FASD. And we have some examples here. So they can be really likeable. My son would get a piece at any door, and he is an incredible flirt with any woman over the age of 70. And he is just a really likeable boy. They can be really friendly, outgoing, really good with animals, younger children, with older people, really kind hearts as well, really forgiving, non-judgmental. Every day is a new day. They can have real skills and talents, so art, music, sport. We are aware of a young woman who has got lots of awards for her area, for I think it's athletics that she does as well. They can be really bright and intelligent. Individuals with FASD generally have an average IQ. It's not a learning disability. And they can really be quite bright, but again, that maybe masks some of the challenges that they're having. And generally, they're quite willing just to have a go and get stuck in. And again, I'll come back to it again, but what's really important is just getting to know what people's strengths are and really encouraging that as well. If they are really good at using a wooden spoon, banging on a pot at the age of 1, and they seem to have a good sense of rhythm, build on that and build up to getting a drum kit or something for them when they're older. Just recognise those strengths and absolutely go with it. So that's been a kind of whirlwind tour of FASD, and there'll be plenty of time to ask questions, but I'll just share with you at the moment just a few more things. The first is the FASD Hub Scotland, just to tell you a little bit about our service. So we offer tiered support to all families across Scotland, so that's biological, adoptive, kinship and fostering families who are parenting somebody who has a history of prenatal alcohol exposure. So you don't need to have a diagnosis to be able to access our services. Even if you've just got suspected that alcohol exposure may be an issue for the person you're caring for, then we'll be very happy to offer support to you. Our Tier 1 services are open to everybody, and they include our helpline, which is staffed by Gemma, who's lurking in the background today. She'll be putting some ideas into the chat, and she's around today. But Gemma staffs our helpline, and it's open 4 days a week, and you're very welcome to call up with any questions you have at any time. We also have a website. We've got a brand new website, and we'll pop the link to that in the chat, but it is fasdhub.scot, and on there you'll find lots of information about FASD. You'll find blogs, fact sheets, links to other resources, videos we've done, all sorts of stuff, and it's growing all the time, so that's well worth a look at as well. And we're also very active on social media, so if you don't follow us already, then look us up on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for lots of information. Over the next couple of months, we're going to be sharing a lot of resources from other organisations as well. So it's definitely worth following us and seeing what else is around. Our Tier 2 services are again open to all families. And this is where we offer more direct support. So we have a Facebook group, which is it's a closed Facebook group, and it's for parents and carers of individuals with FASD or prenatal alcohol exposure. We'll pop the link in the chat to that as well. You're very welcome to come and join us. There's a membership form that you need to complete before you can join, but we can point you in the right direction of that. We also offer one-to-one support. So we take referrals, and people can work with us on a one-to-one basis with either a parent partner or an FASD advisor. Just identifying what your challenges are and working through those. We offer a lot of training and workshops as well, such as the one that you're at today. We've always got lots of events going on. And we also have a fortnightly virtual peer support group as well, where parents and carers meet up on Zoom, and it's usually kind of themed, but it's just an opportunity for some peer support too. And we also have started work recently with adults with FASD as well. And for families who need a little bit extra support, we have access to Tier 3 services, which is therapeutic services, so counselling, appointment with a psychologist and things like that. That's open to adoptive, fostering and kinship carers as well. Unfortunately, we're not able to offer that to biological families. Mentioned fact sheets on our website. We will put a link in the chat to these 2 fact sheets, which we would recommend to you. The first is what is FASD fact sheet. which is great to print out and share with people, and it's got lots of basic information about FASD, a lot of the information that I've said to you today. And also our brand new FASD guide for kinship carers, which has been co-written with KCASS. And we'll pop a link into that and encourage you to go off and have a wee look at that as well. Now, I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to stop talking for the next 5 minutes, because what I'd like to do is share with you a little animation. And you may have seen this already before. So FASD, September is FASD Awareness Month. And one of our big productions that we've made this year for FASD Month was to work alongside individuals with FASD, children and adults with FASD and their families, to create an animation. And it was voiced by a young person who has FASD, and it's been absolutely amazing. I think we're now about 52,000 shares, likes, views. It's absolutely going viral. We're really proud of it. But I would like to share it with you today. And after that, I'll pass over to Susan, who will tell you a little bit about the work of KCASS.
Mum and Dad are still asleep, but because of my FASD, my brain is always busy, and I'm already wide awake. Mum and Dad have made a planner for my day. I find it easier if I know what's happening and when. 8 o'clock means breakfast. Jam on toast is my favourite. I love the crunchy feeling of the burnt toast between my teeth. Mum and Dad know all about FASD. So does my auntie. She's having a baby. She isn't drinking any alcohol while pregnant, making sure my new cousin is as safe as possible. Doctors now know that it is not safe to drink alcohol at any time when pregnant. Mum says it's not always been that way. Lots of people still don't realise how dangerous alcohol can be to an unborn baby. Secondary school is a lot different to primary. Instead of one classroom, I've got 7 in one day. There are so many more people to get to know and things to remember. I hope everyone likes me. Sometimes it's too much at once. I feel much better now. Today I get to tell my class about FASD and why I think differently about the world around me. It's not just me, it could be as many as 1 in 20 people. It's more common than autism and ADHD. People need to think differently like I do. When people with FASD like me are supported by family, professionals and friends like you, then we can achieve great things. I like giving presentations and talking, though I'm not always so confident with maths. It sometimes helps to work things out in a different way. Thanks, Juliet. After school, I visit my friends at our FASD community group. We all have FASD, but we're each unique. Alfie and I love adventures. We like the way going high on the swing makes us feel all wizzy. Anna is very kind to animals. Sometimes she needs a reminder to be gentle. Alyssa is really musical. She loves the vibrations of the drum. Sometimes she plays too loud for me, but that's okay. I like dancing. After seeing my friends, I am starving. Hurry up, Dad. 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 Dad, I'm hungry. After a long day, I'm tired and my brain feels all fuzzy. But my family understands that my brain works differently. They know how to help me. I play my baby cousin a lullaby before bed. I can't wait to meet her. I have strengths and talents, and there is lots more to me than my FASD. But my FASD can often make life tricky, confusing, and frustrating when those around me don't understand why I think differently. When they think differently, life is much easier. My FASD makes me, me.
So that is our FASD animation that we are incredibly proud of, especially because it was voiced by a young person with FASD. And yeah, just so delighted to be able to share that with you. Sorry, my computer's going a little bit crazy here. There we go. And over to you, Susan, I think, for the next part.
I'll start by telling you a little bit about what I do. I'm the project coordinator for Kinship Care Advice Service for Scotland. So I have a kind of overview of what the service does and what we provide for kinship carers. I don't run the helpline. Part of my responsibility is for the helpline to make sure that it's staffed and managed. To make sure that we record everything that we should and that we're doing it correctly, that the information that we're providing to kinship carers is up to date and relevant to what we have, to what you receive. I also have an overview of our website, and some of you might know our website is really outdated. It was run by Mentor UK, who ceased operating a good few years ago now. So the website was very outdated and needed updating, and we're in the process. We've been keeping it up to date to a certain extent, but we now have the agreement to have a whole new website, which will stay on the same link, but it will be much more user-friendly, and it'll be more relevant to nowadays as to how it's operating and what it looks like. So work's just starting on that. So we're really excited to be able to offer something that's up to date and relevant. The old site was very convoluted and quite hard to navigate, and this one should be a lot better. Now this is the team. Thanks, Barbara. As you can see, there's I'm up the top, project coordinator, and you can see Jackie, advisor, advice and communities officer. We look quite a large team, but we're actually quite small. A lot of us are part-time, and we cover the whole of Scotland. We have 2 members of the team, Anne Tom and Rona Pollock, who are actually employed by AFA, but are still that work within the Kinship Care Advice Service for Scotland. And their focus is more on the practitioner side. So it's about identifying good practice within local authorities, within practitioners, within third sector agencies, highlighting that good practice, sharing it, so that the experiences of kinship carers when dealing with these agencies is improved and they get a service which they deserve. So that's a strand to the organisation which hasn't been here before. For many years there's been an advice part of the service, but it's now a much enhanced service, and working with local authorities should make a difference to the support that kinship carers receive. We will still challenge where we hear of, where kinship carers have not received the correct information and advice. We will still challenge that. You see Linda there. Linda's our helpline advisor. So if anyone calls the helpline, it's normally Linda who would answer, and she's an extremely knowledgeable, experienced helpline advisor. She knows kinship care inside out, and you're very fortunate to get Linda on the end of my phone. If you happen to get me, then oh dear. Jackie and I will sometimes cover the helpline. Jackie would be able to answer all the queries correctly. Me, I would be able to do the very basic, and then what I would probably do is refer you on to either Linda or one of the other officers who would be able to take your inquiry forward. So that's our team. Our office is in Edinburgh, but we're all dispersed throughout Scotland, and we will meet up probably about once a month, but we'll all be working from home mainly when we're able to do that. Those of us who live near the office will dip in occasionally. If we move on, so what we do, so I mentioned the helpline, and that's the main way that kinship carers can contact the service. We're open Monday to Friday, 10 till 2:30. Some of you may know that the service transferred over from Citizens Advice Scotland to Adoption UK Scotland, who operate the service in September, and since then we've had over 2,000 inquiries from kinship carers, and for all kinship carers can get in touch via the helpline. We also have a dedicated email for inquiries. People post inquiries on the Facebook page. There's a lot, and on the website as well, there's an area for comments. So there's quite a wide way that people can get in touch with the organisation. Some people like to have the phone, some people like maybe feel a wee bit easier with the email. What we do say that if we don't manage to get back to you, we've had a wee bit of a problem with the 0808 number recently. It doesn't, if Linda tries to phone out using that number, it won't be accepted by your phone. So if anything like that happens, just let us know and get back in touch with us. So that's the main advice part of the organisation, and that's the most important part, so that kinship carers can access us and ask for help and support. We deliver support in lots of different areas. You may phone up with, say, an inquiry about child benefit, but what we will do is look at the whole situation and see if there's anything else that we could offer support with. So it's not just that one area when you call in that we will deal with. We deal with lots of different inquiries, benefit related, child benefit related, welfare benefit related, kinship care allowance related, assessments, if you're going through the assessment process with your local authorities, anything legal. We've got a lot of legal queries, things like housing, problems with education, health services, lots of anything that a kinship carer can has going on in their life, we can support with. Might not always be able to answer that, but we can always signpost to somebody else that would be able to help. Similarly, if a kinship carer called and they were concerned about FASD, or the child they were caring for might have been had prenatal alcohol exposure in the womb, then we would be able to speak with them and make a referral on to our colleagues in FASD Hub. There's lots of benefits to being part of an organisation where there are different parts that we can tap into as well. And we also work with kinship care peer support groups, and any kinship carer who comes on, we would recommend that they get in touch with a support group. We realise support groups aren't for everyone, and there is a private Facebook page which is only for kinship carers, and we would also recommend that for people who maybe weren't quite so fond of groups. I'm not a group person myself, and I can understand, sometimes it's nice to go along, but it's making that initial, I have to go. It can be quite difficult. We also offer a training programme, and this session is part of that for kinship carers, not only for kinship carers, but for professionals as well. the training programme. I think our next session will be on connective parenting, and that's coming up in October. And then we've got emotional health and wellbeing for of children in kinship care coming up in November, and that you can find out information about that on our website, which is the information's on the screen. And we also have a newsletter as well, which you can sign up to. It comes out bi-monthly, and we'll share all that kind of information on there. We'll also do it through social media, Facebook and Twitter as well. I mentioned a wee bit about working with the local authorities to help improve practice and supporting kinship families, and that's part of the organisation that Anne and Rona that they will operate. Although for all we're one KCASS, and we will overlap and we will support each other with that. So Anne Tom runs a monthly meeting with all the local authorities in Scotland, and that looks at best practice and how best to support kinship carers, and it's really taken off and really popular. And there's a really popular, and there's a real buzz about kinship care at the moment, and a real wish to do things better and to do them right, which is really exciting. Part of that, I think, sits with our Kinship Care Advisory Group. We have a number of dedicated kinship carers who have signed up to being part of that advisory group, and they help steer the organisation as to where we're going. They advise us. For example, we're developing a welcome booklet, which hopefully will go to all kinship carers. And it was because the advisory group said when they first became a kinship carer, where was the information? They were told a lot of stuff and then just left to go on with it. So they recognised it would be really important to have something which gave them a lot of information, and that's what we're developing at the moment. They've had sight of that, and they've now advised us about what we should change and what we should include in that. So we're so excited to have the group up and running, and they will feed into the development of the organisation, where we're going. Not only that, they also sit on our steering group, who have an overview of KCASS and the development and in what direction we're moving, what we're getting right, what we don't do quite so well. And then we've got a couple of members who represent the group on that. They also sit on the Kinship Care Collaborative. That's a really new group, and it's sat at a strategic level, and there's their onus is to improve the environment for kinship carers, and part of that will be making changes to legislation, and looking at best practice for local authorities and practitioners working within kinship care. So that's a really exciting development, and this is something which hasn't been around before. So we are waiting to see big things from that, although they keep telling us change takes time, and I do know that to make significant change it does take time, but the fact that this group exists and is willing and capable of making the changes, then it's an exciting time to be a part of kinship care. The only other thing is Kinship Care Week. We have that coming up in March, and that's a big week. It's not a month, thank goodness, like FASD month is, and that's a week where we hope to raise awareness and raise awareness of kinship care, but also to have some fun and put on some nice things for kinship carers during the week, and encourage kinship carers to do the same, maybe within their peer support groups. We're going to Blair Drummond Safari Park on Saturday, and I'm just devastated that we couldn't offer it to every kinship carer, but for those lucky few who have got tickets, we're looking forward to actually getting out and about and being able to do something after 2 long years, and we hope to be able to deliver more fun and happy events in the future. So that's all really I want to say about the service. Please note the helpline number, the email address, and the website details. I can put that in the chat. I think Gemma's already put some stuff in the chat about the website, but I'll certainly do that. And if you need to get in touch with anything, about anything, please get in touch, and we'll do our best to respond to you. Thank you. That's all I want to say about it, Sarah. Shall we take listening to me? It's a very busy slide. We are going to make it a wee bit better, but it covers everything at the moment. Shall we move on to the Q&As now that came through via the Eventbrite page? Okay, I'll just get some of these up and I'll put them into the, I'll copy them and I will put them into the Q&A chat. Oh no, I can't. Sorry, I thought I'd be able to write in it, but I can't. So I'll just read them out if that's okay. I'll start with the first one, and I think these will come to you, Barbara. So one of the first questions that have come through is, how do you handle the behaviour side of things? Sorry, Barbara, you're on mute.
There's no easy, straightforward answer to that one. Have we lost Marion? I think we have. She might have been able to share some of her experiences.
She's still here. Marion, you're on mute.
And your camera's off. Marion might have some experiences that she can share there. I think basically there is no easy answer. There's no quick answer to how you kind of handle behaviours. The first thing I would do is try not to think of them as being behaviours, but I would think of them instead of being symptoms of having a disability or symptoms of FASD. Because I think if we reframe our thinking in that way, then it helps everybody involved. It helps the individual to understand a little bit better, and it helps us as parents and carers to maybe just cope with the challenges that we're facing. So I mean, it's hard without sort of specifics about like certain kinds of behaviours, but I think accepting that maybe some of the things that our individuals do or children, young people do, are maybe not within their control, and maybe finding ways of stopping things reach a stage that those behaviours happen in the first place. So it's maybe looking at the environment that they're in. Is it too much for them? Is it too much like sensory wise for them? Are they feeling stressed about something? Are they hungry? Have they got cognitive fatigue? Has it been a long day at school? What's going on in the environment for that child or young person, and what has led to that incident or that challenging behaviour that you've seen? So I think it's a case of looking beyond the behaviour and looking for the reasons why that behaviour might be happening, and definitely thinking of it in terms of a symptom rather than something that the person's got control of. It's the most basic level I can kind of give, but if you want more specific advice, then definitely get in touch with us and we can offer advice around specific situations.
That's brilliant, thank you. Barbara, Marion, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, it was just when Barbara was speaking there, I always found morning times extremely difficult. At that point, there was 5 boys and 3 of them hardly slept at all through the night. I think that was down to just total that mind keeping work. So in the mornings, it was very difficult. You're trying to get everybody ready for school and kicking off, and they're trying to find their own space and do their own thing, which always resulted in, it was absolutely manic and no one was ever in time for school. You know, so I feel also schools need to realise that perhaps scattered times for a lot of children with FASD would be so beneficial within Scotland. It's just, it's chaotic and such a stress on the adults trying to care for the children. If you could say, well, you know, you haven't slept well, let's say you go to school at 10 as opposed to 9, and, you know, things like that would absolutely help.
I think as a parent, and I would say, yeah, as carers, all of you should be sort of saying that to the schools. Like if my son was struggling in the morning, which he did sometimes, if he didn't make it to school to 9:30, he didn't make it to school to 9:30, and the school have got a responsibility to make accommodations and to make reasonable adjustments for children who have disabilities. So yeah, I would say, you know, if the mornings are chaos, don't sweat it. They'll get to school when they get to school. If they get to school, then that's a brilliant thing in itself. If they're a bit late, don't worry about it. The school will just have to make those accommodations for them. Obviously, keep in touch with
It's
school
about
and talk to them
realising,
about
like,
it, but
sometimes routine.
yeah, routine sometimes works. A lot of children thrive in routine, but it doesn't always work. Especially in the mornings. Mornings are tough, especially if you've got 3 boys like yourself had, Marion, who are all have got challenges. It must have been hard work.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara and Marion. There's been a question put in the chat, but I think it's Gemma has got back to have responded to the answers to the questions. So I'm hoping that that answers or goes some way to help. It's about when the child doesn't know their diagnosis, what is a good way to tell them, and there's a link to how to talk to children about FASD, and hopefully you'll find that helpful, and if not, get in touch with the helpline. Moving on, yeah, there's another one come up in the Q&A. My nephew is 6 and is still in the process of being diagnosed. He has a CAMS referral, but do you have any advice on getting a diagnosis quicker for him?
Yeah, diagnosis, unfortunately, is not a quick process at all. It can be really anything from kind of 2 to 4 years to get a diagnosis. And there isn't a lot we can do to speed it up. I'd say the things, if you've got an appointment with CAMS, that's definitely the right route to take. I think your next stage would be being prepared yourself for going to that appointment and what you can do personally to speed it up. So that would be knowing what you're going to ask for. So you want to be asking for a developmental assessment of the child, or an FASD assessment. There's a new neurodevelopmental pathway which looks at FASD and autism and ADHD, a lot of these kind of conditions. And by asking for that, sometimes rather than specifically an FASD assessment, then it sometimes opens a few more doors. Really, an absolutely key thing to diagnose it is making sure that you've got evidence of prenatal alcohol exposure. So if you have maybe if the birth mother is still involved, is still around, then she might be able to say that she consumed alcohol during pregnancy. Or if not, if there's maybe social work reports that there was alcohol consumed during pregnancy, any kind of written evidence that you have, then that goes a long, long way to helping get a diagnosis. So gather as much information as you possibly can and learn as much about FASD yourself as you possibly can, because sometimes we find that the professionals have obviously got lots of different conditions that they need to know about as well. So sometimes sort of having that knowledge yourself to share with them and make sure that they know what they should be doing next is key too. So yeah, you want to wait for your CAMS appointment. It can be like a year or 2 on a waiting list to see CAMS, unfortunately, and there's not a lot you can do to speed that up. But knowing what you want to ask for, developmental pathway assessment and FASD assessment, and good luck with it, really.
Thanks very much, Barbara, for responding to that. There's something come through in the chat. CAMS told me that they wouldn't deal with FASD, so we were sent back to Child Community Health. Child Community Health, is that normal? CAMS,
it's a very new thing, the whole FASD assessment. It came out in 2019, but it's still very much embedding, and across Scotland geographically, there's pockets where it's really good and pockets where they're still really getting to know the structure and the pathway. So some CAMS teams don't feel that they've got the resources that they're able to offer that assessment. But the assessment can be done by either CAMS or by a community paediatrician. So going back to a community paediatrician is fine. It's a paediatrician who actually makes the diagnosis, but CAMS can be involved as well. So I wouldn't worry about CAMS saying no and you being referred to community paediatrics, because they can certainly make the diagnosis too. And they, again, it depends which area. I saw someone said that they came from Edinburgh. I'm not sure if that's the same person that asked the question there or not. It is in place in Edinburgh. There are people getting to know it, but it is still very much embedding. So yeah, just keep asking, keep going. The pathway is there. Hopefully a paediatrician will be able to help you.
That's reassuring. Thank you for that, Barbara. And we have another one come through in the Q&A. It's, we have a diagnosis of autism. Can we go back to CAMHS and ask for a FASD assessment?
Yeah, there's no harm at all in going back, and if you feel that that's not the right diagnosis that's been given, then absolutely you can go back. We can put a link in the chat to a table which is about overlapping characteristics, and it talks about how conditions such as autism and ADHD and FASD all overlap with each other, and it's all to do with autism is about the it's more about 3 regions of the brain that are affected, so executive functioning things. FASD is much more widespread. So if you feel you're parenting a child who maybe isn't quite fitting the autism box, maybe they've got difficulties in other areas as well, then absolutely it's worth going back and asking for that assessment. If you don't ask, you don't get. And it's really important, I think, that individuals have the right diagnosis. But it's not at all unusual for individuals with FASD to have an autism diagnosis and FASD, or ADHD and FASD. They don't have to only have one diagnosis. So yeah, let's go back and ask.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Barbara. And Gemma's put up the link as well in the chat, the overlapping characteristics, and all these, I take it, are on the website.
Some of them will be, yeah. But drop us an email if there's things. Drop us an email if there's anything that people want. We can easily send it to you.
Brilliant. Right, I'll go back to our pre-given questions. So the next one is, what's your thoughts on deferring a child for a year from starting school, say waiting until they're 6?
I'm not sure if this is, Mary, do you have any experience of that? I'm not sure if you do.
Well, one of the children was 4 whenever he started to school, and I never ever felt he was ready. But in the same instance, I don't know whether by getting through in, shall you say, to actually the mainstream school was good for him either, because at that point there was no diagnosis made, and it was during the primary years that, you know, I was approaching professionals and asking, but unfortunately for these boys here in Scotland, I think we would say, oh, you've been double dunted, you've actually got, you've been placed into a kinship family, which was one dunt, you came cross borders, which was double dunted. And now you're looking at a possibility of FASD, so you've been treble dunted here. So I think early intervention is utmost for, especially in kinship placements, where people can advise you of the best position, because you're not actually, you don't know, you're just hoping to do the best and you don't know. That's why it's so important to get people there for you at the beginning of your journey, because I can't answer that, and I really don't know. I did put the child into the school because I felt, well, all the other boys are going in here, this is what happens, but probably I would have liked sound advice from a professional at that point before school started.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard when there's lots of changes and moves going on at that time.
Absolutely.
I didn't delay my son going into primary school, but I did delay my daughter going into primary school by a year. So my daughter, it was a concealed pregnancy. Nobody knew that birth mum was pregnant until 2 days before she gave birth, which was at 27 weeks. So my daughter was very premature. She was born in the January instead of the April, which meant she should have been starting school. She knocked her back a year. So she had an extra year at nursery and started school when she was 5.5, and it was absolutely the right decision for her. Just gave her that little bit of extra time to mature, to create that attachment and bond that all types of carers who need to be able to have with their child. And even now, even though she's the oldest in her year, she's probably still the smallest. I'm glad that we did defer her a year, or she would be really behind and really struggling at this stage now. So although she doesn't have FASD, although she does have prenatal alcohol exposure, and for her it was the right decision, but very much it's an individual case by case basis, I would say. But I think Marion's absolutely right. Getting some professional advice from nursery and listening to what they have to say is key.
Yep. That's brilliant. Thank you, Marion and Barbara. Next question. Okay, how to get through to a child who doesn't react to consequences or wrongdoing?
I'll try and answer that. I'll see if Marion's got any ideas of her experience as well. Again, there's absolutely no easy answer to that one. Consequences is really difficult. If you think individuals with FASD, a lot of the challenges they face is to do with executive functioning, the frontal lobe. So that's the thinking, the planning, the organising, and understanding consequences. That's part of the brain that can be quite significantly affected. So understanding consequences in terms of behaviours, yeah, that can be a real challenging, and that can be really frustrating for the caregiver as well. Why do they not get it? Why do they keep repeating the same thing over and over again? So it's, I mean, we could do a whole day about consequences and the sort of behaviour side of things. But an idea might be to use kind of natural consequences. That's something we would suggest. So instead of, say, if some behaviour happens, instead of saying, right, that's it, you're grounded, you're not going out, that kind of behaviour technique probably isn't going to work with an individual with FASD. However, sitting down and encouraging them to think about what's happened, maybe make some kind of recommends to whoever it is that they've hurt, then that might happen better. What individuals really seek is connection before correction. So that relationship you have with the child or young person is actually key to helping them manage their symptoms of their FASD. So being able to have that open conversation with them, calm, being able to talk through what has happened is actually far more beneficial than consequences in the traditional parenting approach, because those kind of consequences are, I mean, they might even make things worse, because individuals, the whole concept of consequences is incredibly difficult. So yeah, I'm really sorry there's no really quick, easy fix to that one, either. But understanding the environment, looking at what's happened, what's caused the behaviour in the first place, is all much more beneficial than sticker charts and grounding. That kind of thing probably won't work.
Thanks, Barbara. Do you have anything to add to that, Marion?
Yeah, I do agree there with Barbara. Consequences are very, very difficult to transmit as to why they're being told they can't have or not access the phone because they've been on it for 2 hours, but in their mind, that just didn't happen. You know, but when it certainly didn't happen, and it was maybe 20 minutes, it wasn't 2 hours. And I think a huge problem for a lot of these children is that in their own mind, the scenario was totally different from what it actually was. If you see what I mean, because half of maybe what's happened has been remembered and another half has been blocked. So when you're relaying, you know, well, I didn't think this was very fair because today, if you can remember, this happened. Well, actually, they don't remember it the same way. So then when you're penalising or trying to like set down rules or, you know, well, this is right, this is wrong, and it's so complicated for them to actually get it and understand that they were causing a problem at that particular time. So that's a huge difficulty for me as a parent, trying to like have like 5 siblings at the one time where one has actually done something where it's hurt another one, but in their mind they didn't. So then you're becoming unfair to them by saying that's not right. They've seen it in a totally different outlet. It just didn't happen the same way, unfortunately. It didn't happen. So that's quite a challenge in itself.
Yeah, it's very complex. Yeah, and there's absolutely no quick fix. But again, if people are having individual things they'd like to talk about, please just pick up the phone to a helpline, and we can offer advice and signposting for depending what kind of behaviours you're looking for. And also we've got training coming up by the end of the year now, I think, which is all about strategies for caregivers. And we're going to be looking at lots of different themes and yeah, providing support around those. And so keep a wee eye out for that as well, because consequences and things will all be part of that training course that we're hopefully going to offer very soon to you all.
Yeah, but Gemma's put in the chat, we've got non-violent resistance, connective parenting coming up. I think that's on the 6th of October. And I'll pop in a link to the training when the girls are answering the next question. And if anyone there, it is full at the moment. However, there may be spaces becoming available. So even if it's full and you want to put yourself on the waiting list, then that would be, you could do that. We are looking to see if it would be recorded or not. We're not certain. I just noticed that there's a discussion going on about whether or not it would be appropriate. Some of our training is appropriate to be recorded and others isn't. So we'll keep everybody up to date with that, with what's going on with the NVR training. I'll move on to the next question. So how are referrals to be assessed for FASD done in different health boards? How would you find this out in your area? Or what are the different pathways to getting an assessment? So that's kind of me. You okay with that? Do you want me to read it out again, Barbara?
No, that's okay. We can go with that. Good. So if you're interested in, if you want to looking to get a diagnosis, what you need to know about is the SIGN guidelines, SIGN 156, and we'll pop a link in the chat to that. And that is the pathway that came out in 2019 that lays down how local authorities what they should put in place for you to be able to access a diagnosis. And there's a few different resources that are available. There's a big, huge manual that talks all about it. There's a parent and carer guide, which we would definitely recommend. And there is a little YouTube video as well. But the parent carer guide would really tell you everything you kind of need to know. So the route to diagnosis is basically that you go to your GP and take along as much information as you can and ask for a FASD assessment, a neurodevelopmental pathway, and you would like referred to either CAMS or to a paediatrician. And that's the route. That's the laid down route that all local authorities must follow. As I say, it's a bit patchy in places, but it is beginning to fall into place now. So you want to ask for CAMS or a paediatrician. They would then bring in a whole load of other services like occupational therapy, physiotherapy, speech therapy. The school might well be involved as well if they're in school. And everybody would be asked to contribute towards an assessment, and then a diagnosis would either be given or it would not be given. Just to explain what the different diagnoses are, there's two. You might have heard of things like fetal alcohol syndrome, ARND, partial FAS, lots of different things like that. The only terms we use now are FASD with sentinel facial features and FASD without sentinel facial features. So if you remember earlier, the facial features are the narrow eye opening, the thin upper lip, and the smooth philtrum. If the facial features are there, it makes diagnosis a lot easier, and it should be quite a straightforward process because they don't need written evidence of prenatal alcohol exposure. If the facial features are not there, which is the case in 90%, then you do need to get the written evidence as well. And that can be a real challenge, particularly for fostering kinship and adoptive families, to be able to get that information. So yeah, every place in Scotland should be covering the same pathway. Some use different assessment techniques, and the neurodevelopmental guide pathway document, which I'm not sure Gemma's got the link to yet, but she might be able to Google it and find it. It sets out what the different tests are that are available, and not all health boards have access to all of those tests. But that document might give you some ideas of what you should be able to get access to. But basically everywhere must follow the same route now, but they all have their own little tweaks in terms of the way they do it. Should be possible everywhere, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, arm yourself with knowledge and go and batter the door down till they till they listen.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Barbara. Does anyone have anything else? There's no, I don't have any other questions that were sent via Eventbrite, and there's nothing that I can see on the Q&A or the chat.
Maybe just, somebody popped a question in, but I think one of the team answered it, but I don't think everybody else would have seen the response.
Okay.
It was just about asking about talking to children about FASD that you'd mentioned earlier. Just so that I think if Gemma could maybe pop the link in the chat, we'll put a link in there to some resources if it is something that you want to know more about, is talking to individuals about FASD. There's some really good websites out there. Me and my FASD, FASD.me, all of these links are in the link or on our website, which we'll give you the link to. But my advice is always normalise it, start talking about it from as young as possible. Chances are they might know that they're a little bit different, and they maybe think a wee bit differently. We've always been open with my son about his FASD. He was diagnosed when he was 4 months old, so it's always been around for him. And he absolutely embraces it now, because we're really positive about it and we're really positive about his strengths. He's really positive and he's a great ambassador for FASD now. So it's definitely worth having follow the link. It's in the chat there. It's on our website, and be positive would be my best advice.
It says that the boy's 13 and doesn't yet know his diagnosis. What is a good way to tell him? So that those links that you've provided, that there'll be some tips and hints on how to do that. And our video that we showed you this morning as well. That's a really good way of starting conversation too. Yeah, that's a great idea to use that. Okay, I think that's everything. Hold on a wee second. I'll just have these are just the right. No, I don't have anything else. Jackie, sorry, is there anything you'd like to say about our service, about people getting in touch with our with the KCASS service, and how that interacts with FASD? Because I know I kind of skirted over our part of it, and then.
No, I was just really going to say, following on from the helpline, where Linda will get the referrals mainly from Kinship Carers, and referrals there can be from MPs, CAB, other support organisation. Hopefully, though, Linda will be able to resolve the issues at source, but if it's not possible, she then passes what are the more complex cases to advisors. So, as well as looking at the legal status of the child, I think I said we'd apply appropriate legislation, and we try and achieve kinship care payments from the local authority. But there's also assessment on welfare benefits and any other kinds of support. So if there is any things like mental health issues and linking into disabilities, then we will support the client through those kind of I suppose applications. Things like, the child disability payments come out, so we'll support through, as well as through the kinship part of it, any welfare benefits, including disability related benefits that the kinship carer may be entitled to. And that includes challenging local authority decisions, as well as DWP and the benefits. And we'll support the kinship carer through complaints to, up to the Ombudsman. So, people are not left sort of floundering with legislation, etc. themselves. But yeah, just really to point out that as well as kinship care and benefits, it includes other health related support via the kinship care helpline.
You're on mute again. Thanks, Jackie, for that. Marion, you got anything to add before we finish up? It's been brilliant to have you here today, so thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. No, thank you for allowing me. No, what I would say is I would years of trying to like have this kinship adoption fostering on a level which is only fair. I think it's shocking how kinship carers are treated financially, emotionally, practically, every way. And that does certainly need to change so as these young people can go on and thrive. And that it's absolutely needed. I mean, I always say it's a case of like second-class councils creating second-class citizens, and we are allowing that to happen, and it does need big changes because every child deserves the same, every single child. And at the moment, it's not happening. It's getting there, it's getting a bit better. I started this journey 14 years ago, but no, the services are just not there. I'm talking about council services. So these outreach support groups are doing their utmost to support, but people need to speak up and say this is unacceptable.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marion. And I'm hoping that our service now is being in a position where the voices of kinship carers can be heard, especially through our advisory group, because often.
Yeah, I'm speaking more of local authority services when a child has been accommodated in placements. Said, well, the child can go there. When that child is placed within that family setting, that family should be supported, the same as that parent, foster carer, kinship carer. They're all doing the same job, and they should all be met with the same level of care.
Yeah, that's really insightful, and I would totally agree with you. And that's what that's what the service is here for, to try and get that same support for kinship families going forward. And we know there's a lot of challenges out there still to be addressed. We're not blind to that. We hear it every day in our job, the challenges that kinship carers face. But there does seem to be a reason for encouragement, shall we say, that there does seem to be a willingness to want to change, which is different. But it's early days, but our job is to make sure that doesn't fall by the wayside, and that it's any changes pushed forward, and that the voices of kinship carers are heard as a part of that. Because there's no point in all these big high heads sitting up in a strategic group if there's nothing coming from service users and professionals who work in the field. So it's really important, and that's why we can be positive, is because we do have kinship carers who are able to to have their voices heard, the representative of kinship carers, and they know what doesn't work. So totally agree with you, and thanks for sharing that today.
You're welcome.
Barbara, do you have anything else, or just to finish off? No, just to say that thank you very much for inviting us along today to speak to all the kinship carers, and we're absolutely here to support kinship carers. Feel free to join our Facebook group. We would love to see you at our training, love to see you as part of our community as well. So very much here to support you, so please feel free to get in touch with us. Hold on a second, there's another question and a hand up. Hold on a second. Before we leave, okay, here is another one. Yes, so do you have any advice on dealing with siblings of the young person who has been diagnosed? Well, from my experience, my daughter is just who I kind of need her to be. I need her to be the person that is just a normal sister to her younger brother, and fight with him and play with him and do all the normal things that siblings do. But as she's got older, I've begun to notice a change, and she now takes on a bit more of a caring responsibility for him. She'll look out for him. At school, she'll keep a wee eye on what he's doing. She is my biggest spy. She'll report back to me exactly what's happening, which is really helpful because I don't hear anything from my son. And you know, she's got that real kind, caring approach. She knows all about his challenges. It's completely normal to her because she's, apart from the first year of her life, she's always known her brother. The first 2 years of her life, she's always known her brother. And so yeah, get siblings on board, help them understand, show them the animation, show them all the resources, help them to be educated, help them to be ambassadors for FASD, help them to be really positive about it as well, and help them naturally find their path and how they can support that person, but down to their own personality, whether they engage with that or not. Children with FASD do have a disability, so sometimes there's young carer projects that might be beneficial if you feel they would need something to some kind of support if the individual with FASD brings a lot of challenges into the home. But yeah, giving them their place, giving them their space, and empowering them to be themselves, and also empowering them to support their younger brother or sister if it's inclined to do so, which they may or may not be.
Okay, so we'll let you go now. You're off the hook. So thanks so much for coming along today, and maybe see you at some other events.
Thanks, everyone.